Yeah, no, thank you everyone for your patience. It's, we've got lots of things to hook up in there. Chapel is joining us on well, as the others, I am sure. Thank you for joining us. We'll call to order the Planning Commission for Cottonwood Heights for this Wednesday, December 1st, 2021. This is our business meeting. We have, I'll just run through how this meeting goes to give you a feel for it. We have our, first off, we'll do a general public comment period. This is a time for, if you are here to share a comment on something that is not on our agenda this evening. So if there's something you wanted to share in a public forum for the city, that would be the time to do it. And we'll give you 3 minutes for that. Welcome you to the podium and state your name, and then we'll give you 3 minutes. And then we'll move into our business items. And this evening we have project SUB 21006, which will be our first business item. That is a public hearing to take possible action on a request for a subdivision amendment for proposed changes to Murray No. 7 condominiums, which is at 7280 South Ponderosa Drive. Our second item is project CUP 21-016. This is a public hearing to receive comment to take possible action on a request from Brian Bone, and this is for a conditional use permit for a retail store within an existing commercial building at 1441 East Fort Union Boulevard. And our third item is a public hearing to receive comment and take possible action on a request from Ivory Homes for preliminary subdivision plat and conditional use approval of a planned unit development on Dover Hills Drive, which I'm sure many of you are here to comment on. As we go through these, what we'll do is have a presentation of the project by the city, and then we'll invite the applicant to come up and present their application. And then we will open it up for public comment, and then we'll go into deliberation amongst the Planning Commission. So that's how the process goes. Again, in the public comment, if you have, I believe there are still forms back there you can fill out. And then you can bring those up to Heather, and we'll invite you up to the microphone. You have 3 minutes to speak. And it's not a back and forth. We're just here to hear what you're here to share. If you have questions, that's fine, but we try and do that so everyone has a chance to share what they can share. So that's our process. With that said, we'll go ahead and open our general public comment. Again, this is for anything that is not on our agenda tonight. If anyone's here for that, please feel free to come up to the podium, state your name, and we'll give you 3 minutes. You don't have to, but we'll go through those first. It's easier, we'll get your name right. Thank you. Okay, not seeing any for general public comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the general public comment period and move into our business items. And our first item of business is 3.1, which is project SUB-21-006. This is a public hearing to receive comments and take possible action on a request from Todd and Stacy Bradley for a subdivision amendment for proposed changes to the Murray No. 7 condominiums plat. This is located at 7280 South Ponderosa Drive in the residential multifamily R28 zone. We'll go ahead and turn it over to staff to present the application.
Thank you, Commission. Got a brief report for you on this request. We went over this in the work meeting, but I'll give a brief overview for those who are joining us who weren't here for the last hour. As you mentioned, the application subdivision 21-006 Murray No. 7 plat amended. It's at 7280 South Ponderosa Drive. Property is not too far from here, City Hall, just east of Highland Drive, south of 7200 South. You can see it highlighted in red on the screen. The request tonight is preliminary plat approval for Murray No. 7 plat amended. This is converting 2 existing condominium lots to 2 standard lots. Here's a street view. As I said, address 7280 South Ponderosa. There are 2 units that those each have their own separate address currently. Zoning is R28. That is our two-family residential zone, allows duplexes. It's in a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood adjacent to single-family zoning. So I've got the existing and proposed plats in front of you. The existing plat, the Murray number 7 condominium plat, I believe was recorded in 1980 before we became a city. It's platted as 2 condominium units with common area surrounding. The new proposal is to create 2 standard units with no common area. Those highlights are mine just for clarity. As far as the ordinance is concerned, the reason it's here tonight is because Planning Commission is required to review plat amendments. The ordinance requires that the Planning Commission has to be satisfied that neither the public nor any person will be materially injured by the alteration or amendment, and that there's good cause for the amendment. The zoning ordinance has minimum lot size requirements. It's 8,000 square feet for a single lot with a duplex. Lots are allowed to be split in half for ownership purposes, so long as each half is no less than 4,000 square feet. In this case, both units, lot 1 and 2, are over 4,000 square feet. So meets the minimum requirements of the zoning, and we feel like meets the requirements of the subdivision plat. No change is proposed to the site, just a change for ownership purposes. So that's all I have for you tonight. We are recommending approval of the request. I'll leave it here with the model motions. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
I have one actually. Can you show us where the access would be for that number 2 parcel?
Sure, you can see it, I think, best on the street view. So there's just a single driveway access that leads to, you can kind of see it on the screen. There's parking area and garage space under each unit.
Right, and when you split it, show us the split. So how do they access their parcel?
That's a good point. I don't remember if we have an access easement marked. I think we could add that as a condition, or as staff, if you want, we can follow up.
I don't think we can cut them off from any access to their property, so I think we have to have something there.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
That was my question, commissioners. Any other questions for staff? Do we have the applicant? Would they like to present?
I'm not sure if I saw it. I'm not sure if they're here tonight, but I'm happy to follow up with anything that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and Commissioner Chapel, go ahead.
Oh,
Sure. I had a question. We talked about the ordinance and that the requirement would be that this remains a duplex or a twin home property. And that just raised a few questions in my mind about property changes and maintenance. If somebody wants to reside the house, are there rules here? It just seemed like a strange convention. And I wanted to know if there is something in the ordinance about modifications to the existing structure.
I can maybe speak to that a little bit. I don't know that there's any. I think just the property would be required to meet all of the current requirements in the zoning ordinance. So I don't know if there's a specific concern there, but any changes would have to meet all, building height, setback, building code requirements, and they would be reviewed by the city, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. I was more even just thinking about maintenance and things like that, but that might be immaterial. Thank you, Andy.
Sure, yeah. And I'm not sure that, I don't think there's anything that the city would regulate maintenance wise for these attached units.
Thanks, Andy. Anybody else have any? Okay, thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. We'll go ahead and open the public comment period for this item. Anyone's here to comment on this application? Go ahead and approach the microphone. Just state your name and we'll give you 3 minutes.
My name is Julian Finlinson, and I'm involved with the party. This property, they're trying to sell it. They're changing hands, and I just wanted to make it clear. I'm representing a potential buyer. And the reason for this request is that you can't get a conventional loan on an entire HOA. And this parcel, the way it's configured, it's 3 tax parcels. You'd be buying an entire HOA, and that's against Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. So to get conventional financing on it needs to be a more traditional configuration. I'm not sure why it was set up originally as an HOA, but it's just a single owner HOA with 2 units. And that we're just trying to eliminate that so that it meets standard lending guidelines. That's the reason for the application.
Thank you. Anyone else with a public comment for this one? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on this item. Here we go. Staff recommends approval. Any other discussion to this? I have one, and it's a follow-up on what Commissioner Chapel brought up and Mr. Julian brought up as well, which is I think the maintenance issue you're bringing up, as Andy said, is not in the city's purview. But you know, I think we've all seen a duplex that one side looks very different from the other, and that's what happens when you have 2 different owners, or at least what can happen, and why you probably have them initially set up with HOAs so that it's all maintained. I think one additional condition which we have identified is the access issue. We had discussed utilities. I don't know if anyone consider commissioners as well, if anyone's looking to make a motion. Making sure that the easements and access to both properties is maintained.
I can make a motion if you are prepared to hear that.
Go ahead.
I recommend approval of project SUB 21-006 on the condition that access to lot number 2 be approved by the city staff before final completion of the recording of the lots.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote on this one. Start on this end.
Oh, did you call me? Oh,
Go ahead, yes, please.
yes.
Yes. Commissioner Mills, yes.
And Commissioner Bevan, yes.
Commissioner Chapel
Yes.
and Commissioner Coots, yes.
Commissioner Wild, would you bend your mic down just a little bit closer so we make sure we capture it for those joining on Zoom? Thank you.
You get everything you needed, Heather, on that. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on. Our next item of business is project CUP-21-016. This is the public hearing to receive comments and take possible action on a request from Brian Bone for a conditional use permit to operate an audio retail store within an existing commercial building at 1441 East Fort Union Boulevard in the neighborhood commercial zone. So that's the existing zone. And we'll go ahead and invite staff to present the application.
Thank you, Commission. I'm just going to switch over here. If it'll allow me to our second presentation for the evening. Make sure it catches up here on our screens. And on our front screen, you're seeing the new presentation, right? Okay, just making sure. So this is item CUP-21-016. The subject property is 1441 East Fort Union Boulevard. We can see that here highlighted in an aqua line on our map, just across from the Union Park development. The applicant is requesting conditional use approval for an audio retail store titled Utah Audio. And staff is recommending approval of the application with conditions, which I will describe shortly. I just wanted to also show the street view of this property. I think it's a bit more recognizable in that context. Again, just directly across from the Union Park area. As mentioned in the commission chair's overview, the property is zoned neighborhood commercial. No change to zoning is requested. Surrounding properties to this subject include other neighborhood commercial lots, as well as our regional commercial zone, residential multifamily, public facilities, and residential single family. The proposed use before you tonight for consideration is a conditional use in the underlying zone, which is why we are going through this process. A bit more detail here on the proposal for this project. It is an audio retail store within an existing commercial building. The previous business which was at this site was Advanced Behavior Analysis, which I know some commissioners recall that coming through the commission. Some community members may also be familiar with the business. The proposed use tonight is suggesting operating hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And they anticipate using the space for office space for the business, as well as customer consultation. The bulk of their business activities are conducted off-site with in-home installations of equipment. So they will just have one on-site employee at this location to fulfill those sort of business and kind of like administrative uses. Based on their existing operations in Sandy, which have been ongoing for 17 years, the applicant anticipates no more than 5 clients per day, and generally has seen those spaced kind of 1 at a time or maybe 2 at a time. We went over this a bit in our work meeting, but I'll mention it here as well. The previous use at this site had pretty continuous site circulation with parents picking up and dropping off their children throughout the day. And they were approved with the configuration that this applicant tonight is also proposing. No alteration to the building or the site is proposed, and we do anticipate that the proposed use tonight is significantly lower in intensity as far as the number of people coming to and from the site. Our city ordinance requires that there are 8 parking stalls for this use, including 1 ADA accessible stall. And the existing parking lot, which again was approved for the prior business, meets these requirements. And you can see it here in this layout, kind of showing where those stalls can be found. We do recommend that the ride-in, ride-out striping that's existing on site is maintained just for ease of kind of navigation for those using the site. And you'll see that reflected in a recommended condition of approval. I have these conditions listed here in addition to the ride-in, ride-out condition that I mentioned, shown here as number 2. Staff also suggests a condition pertaining to the East Jordan Canal Trail, which is just to the east of the subject property. We recommend that the applicant be prohibited from using any portion of this trail for parking or business uses. I know that the applicant is here tonight, so if it pleases the commission, I'm sure that he could add more detail to his proposal. So if it's fine, I'll maybe take a seat and kind of turn the time over.
Thank you, Sam. And yes, we would love to invite the applicant up.
Commissioners, thank you. My name is Brian Bone.
Welcome.
So I've been operating the audio store for 17 years in Sandy. It is more of a consultation. There's very little retail that actually takes place in the store. There's several rooms with speakers and configurations that allow them to listen to product. And then the product is brought in and installed in their house. And so we really don't have a lot of inventory per se. Because of the nature of our product, we tend to have between, I would say, 2 to 5 clients a day, probably with a new location, probably closer to the 5 figure. And I do only have 1 on-site employee. There were a couple things that were brought up during the work meeting regarding the parking and the garage space. There will be a van in the garage at all times as a company vehicle. There's also another space that will be open. There'll be 2 feet of shelving around the garage. And so those spaces will be left open because in the basement, there's 1,000 feet of unfinished area, which will house the storage of our equipment that's to be installed. As far as the entryway, I would agree with maintaining the stripe. I personally would not add any kind of a barrier because it's a very small space and there'll be cars that'll be damaged. Any other questions?
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
You say the van will be in the garage at all times?
Well, not all times, not during the day. It'll be out on installs at clients' homes during the day.
Thank you.
But there was worry that it would be an entire warehouse in the garage, and that is not the plan.
While we have Mr. Bowen up here, any other questions, Commissioners?
One thing I wanted to point out is on the slide, it said the land is owned by the Petersons. I bought the land. I'm planning on being a long-term member of Cottonwood City,
Welcome. Thank you.
Cottonwood Heights City.
Appreciate it. Thank you. If you just stay available, if the question comes up, we'd appreciate that. but
Okay,
we
thank
Appreciate
you.
your presentation. Before we begin our deliberations, let's go ahead and open it for public comment.
I'm just going to advance the slides. so
Oh,
they're
thank you,
ready.
Sam.
I hope
Appreciate it.
that's okay with everybody.
Anyone here for a public comment for this particular item on our agenda? Not seeing any motion, but I don't want to, if you're gathering your thoughts, I don't want to cut you off early. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on this one and open up any discussion of the planning commissioners.
I expressed some concerns earlier about the traffic pattern and the parking and that kind of thing. I really think that the staff's assessment of the number of cars in and out of here is significantly lower than in the advanced behavioral people that were there. I think that we're really legitimately talking about a few cars per day, and the other one couldn't operate without 30 or 40 cars per day. That's a significant difference. So I don't think that we need to do any more than maintain the signing that is currently up. Recommend people when they leave, turn right. When they turn left, there's trouble, but it's whatever.
Thank you. And I see that Commissioner Chapel has her hand up. Go ahead, Commissioner Chapel.
Oh, sorry about that, Chair Coots. I just didn't lower it before.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm not used to seeing it from this side. I'm usually where Jessica is, so I'm trying to make sure I don't. Okay, so we have the request before us is for this conditional use in the neighborhood commercial zone. There are two staff conditions. The not using the portion of the East Jordan Canal Trail for parking or any other business use, basically not blocking that access. And the right in, right out parking for striping, which we've just discussed. With that, that's the request before us. Entertain a motion if anyone's ready.
I'll make the motion. I move to approve project CUP-21-06 based upon the recommended findings and conditions listed in the staff report dated December 1, 2021.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, commissioners? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote. We'll start down here this time.
Commissioner Bevan votes yes.
Commissioner Wild, yes.
Commissioner Mills, yes.
Commissioner Coots, yes.
Commissioner Allen, yes.
Commissioner Anderson, yes.
And Commissioner Chapel?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That has been approved. Welcome to Cottonwood Heights.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll coordinate. We'll coordinate with you on business license and all the next steps. So
Thank you. Okay, our next item of business. The right spot. Is project SUB-21-007. This is a public hearing to receive comments and take possible action on a request from Ivory Homes for preliminary subdivision plot and conditional use approval of a planned unit development on property located at 3625 East Dover Hills Drive. As we all know, is the former LDS church up there in the residential single family zone. And we'll go ahead and have staff present the application.
Thank you, Commissioners.
This is a request, like Commissioner Coots said, for a preliminary plat and conditional use permit planned unit development for a 17-lot single-family subdivision in the location. It's 3425 Dover Hill Drive. The current property is a 6.17 acre property divided into 2 parcels, but it's one cohesive property owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That property has been surplused. 2 acres of it are being sold pending city council approval of the transaction to the city as to be retained as open space as a park. 4 acres, the remaining 4 acres are being sold to Ivory Homes for private development. Some context in the area, the zoning of the property, and no zone changes proposed. So the zoning of this proposed project is R18, which is low density, single family. R18 allows single family homes to be built not less than 8,000 square feet in size. You can see the adjacent zoning to the north, across Wasatch to the east, to the west, and mostly to the south is also R18. The exception is there's a row of twin homes or 2 family dwellings in the R28 zone, which is a medium density zone directly south of the property. I do want to clarify, there is an undeveloped property at the southeast corner that's owned by a separate private entity. That's not part of this proposal. The proposed subdivision configuration is shown here. It's 17 single family lots. 5 of those lots front directly on Dover Hill Drive, which is a public street that's existing today. The remaining lots are accessed actually from a completely different location off of Summerhill Drive and leading into a private street that's being proposed that includes some emergency vehicle turnaround spaces, but Street A and Street B on the diagram here are proposed to be private streets that will be maintained and enforced and operated privately by a homeowners association. So the remaining 12 lots will access off of that street or off of Summerhill Drive. And then parcel A and parcel B shown on the screen are under this PUD proposal would become the 2 acres that the city purchases from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This configuration is not what's been offered to the city, but this is what would become the city's in this configuration if this project is approved. So parcel A would be the city park. It's very nearly 2 acres and it includes extensive property frontage along the public street. It preserves the existing pavilion that's on the property today. And then parcel B is as a pedestrian connection, a pedestrian pathway. I believe it's 10 feet wide that provides a sidewalk or trail connection for pedestrians from Dover Hill Drive into the park area. And the reason the city feels that's important, as you can kind of see by maybe this context, from Dover Hill Drive, which is this road on the left side, over to the park area, there's no other good pedestrian access without driving quite a ways down and around to get there. So some background here for those in attendance, and because I know some in the neighborhood have been aware of what's been going on and the surplus process, some may not be as aware, but the city and others have been kind of working on this project or the open space here for quite a while. In 2020, the city became aware that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was considering this property for surplus sale. It experienced arson 4 or 5 years ago, and they were deciding what to do with the property. We met numerous times with church officials and representatives to express the city's clear interest in retaining and potentially purchasing, preserving, and maintaining as much public open space on that property as possible. After some time in the seller's review process, internal review process, the decision was made by the seller or by the property owner, by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to list the property for sale on the open market. So in spring 2021, the city submitted an offer for purchase of 3 acres of open space, which generally matches the configuration that you see there today, the ball field and that area. That's about 3 acres. There were members of the local neighborhood and local church congregation there that were involved separately from the city's offer, but involved in communicating with church officials at the same time. again, expressing the desire to maintain as much open space as possible on the site. So a lot of work went into to making sure the local desire was heard as loudly and clearly as possible. Ultimately, the final decision was made to offer 2 acres of land for sale to the city and described as the eastern 2 acres, which I'll show a general configuration of in a second. So those 2 acres were offered for sale to the city. The remaining 4 acres were offered to a private developer, which eventually became Ivory Homes, who was chosen as the buyer and potential developer for that 4 acres. However, the layout of the eastern 2 acres that was explained to us caused numerous concerns. So the city continued to work with the church and with Ivory Homes, knowing that they were the contracted buyer, to make every effort possible and maximize the design of the 2 acres offered to the city. What that boiled down to was pedestrian access from the adjacent public neighborhood, maximum property frontage for the city park, and preservation of the pavilion. The ball diamond is not, it's not in the configuration. It's not the way the property lines have been drawn, and given the 2 acre that's been offered, it's not possible to preserve the ball field, but we felt strongly that at least the pavilion should be preserved. It's in good shape, and that's an expensive piece of equipment that the city would probably look to purchase and install anyways if it were designing a park from complete scratch. So after numerous meetings, Ivory Homes was generally receptive of the city's expressed concerns and worked on finding a subdivision layout or design configuration that made an effort to support these requests of maximizing the public park space that the city has been offered for purchase. That has led us to the proposal in front of the commission tonight, which is a proposed plan unit development. And I'll get into the plan unit development portion of this and what that means, but again, the impetus for that, proposing this as a plan unit development rather than a standard subdivision, was to make an effort to maximize the city open space parcel beyond what was offered for purchase to the city. In addition, because the configuration of the open space and the trail connection is different than what we've been offered, there is a draft development agreement that will be presented to the city council that would be entered into between the city and Ivory Homes, approved by the city council, that would ensure optimal interface between the private development and city park design and provide as much benefit as possible in that city park to the residents of the city. Again, the big 3 things there: frontage, access, and the pavilion will be at the forefront of that. So preliminary approval is desired by Ivory Homes prior to entering or signing a development agreement. And the development agreement will be discussed at the December 14th council meeting. We have a change in city council quickly approaching, and requested close dates of property acquisition are the end of this year, very, very early 2022. So the timing is a little tight, but we do feel that this is being put through the proper public process and it's before the Planning Commission tonight. This is just this, again, this is not the official 2 acre piece that was offered to the city. This is a visual representation of drawing a line across the eastern 2 acres of the parcel to give an idea of what that might look like. But you can see it in almost any way you draw that line does not preserve the existing pavilion, and provides very little public frontage and presents quite an access issue unless you're coming into this park directly from Summerhill Drive. There's no other pedestrian access that makes it possible for public access to this park. So this was from the work session, but I've drawn some lines on the screen there. Everything south, kind of below the curved line, the curved yellow line is what would be purchased and owned by the city, including this access trail here. The square there is just a rough indication of where the existing pavilion would fall on that property. However, I think it's good to point out here a 2 acre eastern 2 acre configuration compared to what's being proposed does help accomplish a lot of the priorities that the city tried very hard to communicate with both the seller and Ivory Homes. Details of the subdivision. The zoning is R18 and no zone change is proposed. We had heard that might be a concern, that there's They're proposing twin homes here. That is not the case. The zoning is proposed to remain R18, low density, single family. Over the entire 6 acres, the density is 2.75 units per acre. The maximum density allowed, if you just divide that by 8,000 square foot lots, would be approximately 33 lots. And if you take out the 2 acres being purchased by the city and just calculate this based on 4 acres, the maximum number of units is still 22 or 23 units that could feasibly be built here. So in either case, the proposed density is well within zoning ordinance constraints and limitations, and actually below in both cases. Again, the open space proposed is 2 acres. A PUD, planned unit development, does not have to propose public open space, and other PUDs in the city have not. They include private open space. Part of this one, though, is 2 acres that would be fully public, owned and maintained by the city. Even today, while that is a park space, it's still privately owned. So, you know, it's not legally accessible to everybody being owned privately. This, we feel, would provide a real benefit to the neighborhood here to provide that public open space. And again, preservation of the existing pavilion, that 2 acres equates to about 32% of public open space. And again, if you set aside the 2 acres and considered Ivory's proposal without the 2 acres, it's very likely that a planned unit development would not be proposed. And in a standard subdivision, there's no additional open space requirements for subdivisions under 5 acres, unless it's a planned unit development. Access is divided in 2 areas here. 5 lots will be accessed on Dover Hill. The remaining will be accessed on Summer Hill Drive. So here's just an overview of some of the planned unit development requirements in the city code. And planned unit development is abbreviated as PUD, so that's how I'll refer to it. A PUD must demonstrate creative use of the land, distinct and different from what could be provided with a standard subdivision. Use of the land must be efficient, utilizing a smaller network of utilities and streets, thereby allowing a greater amount of open lands. Again, because what's been offered to the city for purchase of open space and what's presented here is different, we do feel as staff that it's merited to include that open space as one of the benefits being provided by this PUD, and certainly a more beneficial configuration than would otherwise be possible under the standard subdivision process. So that's how we feel that this proposal is complying with this code provision. As a trade-off to implementing a more creative approach to development, PUDs may be granted exceptions to the normal massing requirements, including minimum setbacks, building offsets, lot size, minimum lot area, maximum height of structures, and lot coverage. They may vary, and we have other PUDs in the city where we have granted lots less than 8,000 square feet in the R18 zone because the overall density still has to be the same. You're essentially clustering homes. That is not the case here. The exceptions being requested by Ivory Homes are a slight reduction in lot width and caused by a reduction in lot width, a reduction in the side setback requirements of homes within the subdivision. There's no variation being proposed to building height or how that's measured. There's no variation being proposed to lot size. All 17 lots are 8,000 square feet or larger, fully compliant with the R18 zone. And there's no proposed exception to the front setback or the rear setback, which we also feel is critical to provide adequate space for a driveway and rear yard separation between homes that back onto each other. This is an example. I won't go through all of these lots, but lot by lot, you can see the size. They are all over 8,000 square feet. The narrowest lot is 55 feet, but all the other lots are 65 feet in width or greater. So with the exception of lot 101, all lots are within 5 feet of the minimum lot frontage that would apply anyways. And in the applicant's narrative and in conversations about this, the lot frontage was reduced only as necessary to accommodate the maximum design or benefit of the open space. Lot 101 in those first 5 lots are on Dover Hill Drive. That is the location of the pedestrian connection. So there's 10 feet there that normally would not be required, that they're proposing to dedicate to the city for public ownership, that that's 10 feet they're not using for lot width. So that's where some of that lot reduction comes from. But the lot variations that were requested were done to accommodate the city's request for the design of the city park. Other criteria that need to be met for any PUD, there are design criteria, which include review of design guidelines, review of subdivision layouts, review of landscaping, materials, fencing, things like that. We are recommending a condition, and this is required by code anyways, that the Architecture Review Commission thoroughly review those design criteria in a public meeting, which is their role, to ensure that the proposed subdivision complies with all of the design criteria requirements in the PUD ordinance. The Architecture Review Commission specializes and has expertise in architecture and planning and design and landscaping. So they are a well-qualified commission to handle that, and the authority is actually granted to them in the PUD ordinance. Pedestrian movements, another consideration. Again, we feel the wider frontage of the city park and the trail access from Dover Hill Drive really helps enhance pedestrian movement well beyond what we could require for a standard subdivision. Effect on adjacent properties. While the reduced lot sizes and reduced setbacks will have some effect on adjacent properties, that we feel is mitigated by the fact that these are all proposed to be single-family lots that are all a minimum 8,000 square feet. I know there's been concerns of equating these houses to some of the homes in Giverny, which is another planned unit development, but some of those lots are 4,000 square feet in size. So these lots are much larger than what was approved down there. Access standards. This subdivision, prior to any final plat recordation or final approval, would need to be reviewed by the city engineer, by the fire department, by by all city departments to ensure that the road layout they're proposing complies with all access codes, especially that private lane and emergency vehicle access. That's going to be important to look at there. That is recommended as a condition of approval. And then preservation of natural features, protection from soil erosion, and inconsistent development patterns. We feel that the optimized park design really helps preserve a lot of what the community values in this site today, which is that open space. It provides a well-designed open space amenity that's fully open to the public that otherwise doesn't exist in this entire neighborhood. In addition, we have made a recommended condition of approval that the applicant have an arborist conduct a tree survey to identify all the trees on site, identify the health of those trees, and preserve as many healthy trees as possible. Sensitive lands is a concern of the cities on this site. The eastern portion of this property falls within the sensitive lands overlay zone. The primary hazard potential on site, at least based on the data we have today, is fault activity. So there's a potential for fault lines on this site. However, the city will require the applicant to review the entire site and identify all hazards present on the site. The other hazards we look at are the soil condition, groundwater, liquefaction, hillside, slope stability. All of those hazards will be vetted and looked at on this property. Prior to final approval, the project will be required to complete all required sensitive lands hazard studies. That could include fault trenching on the site, that will include fault trenching on the site. That could include slope stability analysis, soil samples, borings to identify soil conditions. It's a very extensive sensitive lands process, and nothing will be granted final approval or plat recordation until those issues are clearly identified and mitigation techniques are proposed that are acceptable to the city. If faults are identified, this has been discussed in other projects in the past, what the city ordinance requires is the identification of those fault hazards and fault setback areas on any recorded subdivision plat, and then a recordation of a notice of hazard against the title of any affected property to make it very clear that there are hazards present in the area. Here's an example of the sensitive lands overlay. We don't know exactly where hazards are located, which is why we require the extensive study prior to any development. So next steps. The next steps are going to take a lot of time and a lot of technical review to go through. The first thing we'll do is kind of in tandem, we'll take this to the Architecture Review Commission to review the design guideline requirement of the PUD ordinance. They are required to issue a certificate of design compliance, which is their formal approval before this can move to final approval or plat recordation. City Council Development Agreement, again, to ensure that the public park design is maintained in the final product. And because the proposed park layout differs than the land configuration that was offered to the city by the seller. Preparation and review of final plat and construction plans. This includes full civil engineered site plans, grading plans, drainage plans, erosion control plans, utilities, subject to full review and compliance with all relevant city codes, fire codes, building codes, anything else. A traffic study to ensure that the traffic generated from the 17 homes does not overburden the city street system. Again, technical review and approval by all city departments. That also includes utility departments, which are not city departments, but water and sewer and the other utilities will need to look at plans and approve them. And then a complete sensitive lands hazard analysis, which would include the identification of hazards, study of the hazards, reports, mitigation recommendations, et cetera, all subject to the city's extensive sensitive lands review process. The very last step is final recordation. So in this process, if there are any issues discovered or identified as part of the next steps here that result in modifications to the subdivision layout you see tonight, the number or location of lots, basically anything that results in a change to what's being considered tonight, a new preliminary plat and public hearing, which will include new public noticing, posting a new sign on the site, everything. That will be required by Planning Commission, and we kind of take a step back and start over. A PUD is a conditional use, so the state code, which preempts local code if there are conflicts, states that a land use authority shall approve a conditional use. However, I'll paraphrase, reasonable conditions may be imposed to mitigate reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use. We have provided 10 recommended conditions of approval. I'm not going to read through those right now. But they do cover a lot of what we've said, including the sensitive land studies, the full civil plan review, certificate of design compliance. It's a public street, so we've asked for plans on how they propose to handle road maintenance and snow removal and trash collection and those things. And then again, conditioned in here is that any significant modification to the preliminary plat requires an updated hearing by the Planning Commission. So based on this analysis and the more in-depth analysis in the project staff report, staff is recommending approval of both the preliminary plat and the planned unit development, subject to findings and conditions. And I do want to clarify, a conditional use is not considered approved until all conditions are met. So we feel that recommending approval of a preliminary plat, which allows them to take steps towards the final plat, and recommending approval of the PUD with these extensive conditions will allow the city proper time to review and vet every single aspect of this to ensure it complies with code, to present this to the ARC to ensure that the design compliance is there when compared to the PUD requirements. And that if all of those things are met, at the end of the day, we have a PUD that provides a benefit to the city in what will be a 2-acre city park that's designed much more optimally with better access than what we've been offered as a city. Any questions?
Thanks. I think we'll hold off on our questions and invite the applicants, because it's not the city, it's Ivory Homes, right?
Correct.
Invite them up.
Go there.
Evening, Commission. Brian Prince with Ivory Development.
Welcome, thank you.
I attended the work session. I'll give a brief overview and then address a few of the questions that were raised in the work session, and then happy to answer any other questions that you have. I want to thank Mike. He's been excellent to work with, and I thought he gave a very thorough review. To give a little context and background behind this proposal, I want to point out that Ivory got involved, I think, after the point that the property owner, the church, had decided to sell 4 acres to private development and 2 acres to the city. the church representatives and their brokers reached out to Ivory and I believe several developers, builders, marketing the property. Then it was put on hold and they came back several months later with the message that they decided to sell the westernly 4 acres. We made an offer and entered into an agreement. So the current situation is we're in contract to purchase the westernly 4 acres, like Mike pointed out. Following that, the mayor and staff members reached out to Ivory and requested to sit down and talk about the plan, Ivory's vision for the subdivision. And we did that over a course of several meetings. I think it's important to understand that Ivory entered into this contract with the intent to develop a standard subdivision. We reviewed the city's general plan, the existing zoning, the R18 zoning, and our intent when we went under contract to purchase the property was to do a standard by right R18 subdivision. Like I said, we sat down with the mayor and staff and they expressed their interest in trying to find a way and a design to create some public open space there and preserve some of those elements like the pavilion and other things that are there and accommodate a subdivision design. So the point being that this design, the boundary of the proposed park, the dimension that you see there, the envisioned elements, the vision is a vision that the staff gave to me, to Ivory, and asked that we come back with a subdivision that would accommodate that. So we have designed the subdivision around this envisioned park. And I think it's a great proposal. I think it produces an outcome that meets the city's desires and accommodates a viable subdivision. And we did it in a way that didn't increase density or produce a residential product that I think would be that would not be consistent or complement the neighborhood. Like Mike pointed out, we're proposing lot sizes that are consistent with the underlying zoning of 8,000 square feet. One question that was brought up in the work session was about product. You know, what does Ivory plan to build here? They are very, for this city, for Cottonwood Heights, you have a lot of 8,000 square foot lots in the city. So the scale and dimension of these lot sizes are not wildly different than other neighborhoods in Cottonwood Heights. I think the best analog for this body, for this commission and the residents that are here, Ivory completed a subdivision just up the road from here off of Danish in Denmark. That I think is a good analog as it relates to the architectural theming and exterior building finishes. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't, drive through that neighborhood. It's called Watson Hollow. That will give you a good sense of the types of homes as it relates to architecture and exterior finishes that Ivory would envision in this subdivision. Different scale, those are bigger homes on a little bigger lots, but very similar architecture, high-end finishes. This will be a very high-end subdivision with a great quality home product. Another question that came up was a concern around grading. There is, as if you've visited the site, there is slope from Dover Hill as you move east toward Wasatch Boulevard, and that looking at the dimension of the parcel going from Dover Hill to the east to Wasatch, it's about a little over 700 linear feet. It drops about 18 feet. So there is some slope to catch. It's not as dramatic as the eye may, as the perception if you go drive through that parking lot. Let me see. Can I do this, Mike? Can you see the screen here? Oh, there we go. Okay. So the specific question is, how would I catch the grade or accommodate the grade through the subdivision? There would be some retention here along these backs of these lots to catch some grade as we're going east off of Dover Hill. There will be, the grading design does show some slope around the perimeter to 3-to-1 slope off of this private lane down into the park space. And then there will likely be probably 2 locations along this east-west row of lots along the side yard line where there'll be some rock retention placed.
You
to
know,
catch that.
it might help you. We have this in our packet, so I assume it can be brought up on the screen here with the grading, with your overlay on top of it. It might be
I
helpful.
think this is Mike's.
Page 29 in our packet.
Yeah, I'll have to open a different document, but I can do
This is
that.
the PowerPoint, but maybe he can pull
Okay,
that up.
yeah, I don't want to confuse it, just thought it might help.
So, but I think the simple answer is that we envision some rock retention here. Oop. And then and then retention in probably 2 side yards along this bank of lots to catch that grade. And then the grading plan does show a 3-to-1 slope from this private lane down into the park. Some of that, the grade in the park, I think, is to be determined based on the city's vision for the park. You know, there's a lot of amenities that can be produced with grade, like a sledding hill or a you know, there's a lot of things. Because Ivory didn't go to the extent of saying, okay, city, this is what you should do with your park. Mike mentioned, I think that the plan would be to continue to take in public input before they took the next step of hiring a consultant to design the park. Does that answer the question about the grading?
Well, and to clarify, right now, the grade is at the back, the far north end of the lot. So it goes all the way down to the same elevation, north-south. So you're saying that it's not going to be captured in the rear of the lots. Is that correct?
There will be some slope. There'll be some grading here. There will be some grade. I think it won't be as large. It'll be some minimal grade caught here along the north boundary, and then probably 2 to 3 locations on the side yards where grade is caught as we move from west to east.
It's pretty substantial, you know, that slope is over 10 feet, I'm guessing. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you're going to catch it in the back of the yards, the front of the yards, or you're going to push it into the park.
Well, so the overall site will be regraded, and so if you stood in the field today, some of that site will be raised up, some of it will be lowered. So the average slope as you go from west to east will be a lot more moderate than I think what you see on the site today.
And that also will get to the question of the residents around the north side that are going to, I'm sure, anticipate how high is the building going to be. So what the effective grade will be of those homes is going to be of significant concern to all those neighbors on the north. So that's what.
Totally agree with that. I think it's fair to say that those lots, I'll call it lots 12 through 17, those homes will not sit higher than the existing homes to the north. I mean, I think it's going to be, I mean, is that your concern?
Well, I don't think that's even possible to build it up quite that high, but I mean, you know, I think their question is it going to be at the level of the ball field, or is it going to be at the level of the top of the hill? And what I'm getting is that you're not committing that it will be somewhere in between, which is quite a range. So you're saying it will be within a 10-foot range.
Yeah, it'll be in between. It won't be as low as the bottom of where that field is, and it won't be as high as the far north boundary elevation. Were there any other questions?
I had a question about the grading plan, and maybe city staff, or maybe you can clear this up for me.
Yeah.
In looking at some of the slides, it looks like there's a retention pond on the far eastern portion of the city park, but then in the landscaping plan is turf sod. Is the intention that it is some kind of stormwater management mitigation,
Yes.
kind of dual service?
To clarify on that, I told this to staff. There was a request for some, and I did it hesitantly, provided a landscape plan. That is in no way a real clear vision for the park. It was just an example to give it scale.
Sure.
That would be up to the city to design that, but absolutely, there is a stormwater facility planned.
I mean, but
in
that
the park
renders,
space.
probably a quarter to a third of the city-owned land.
Yeah.
Less than useful.
I will
There's a
state-
lot of, go ahead, Mike.
From the city's perspective, that's something we're looking at. Our city engineer has concerns about that and how that's configured. I think that will resolve itself because we don't want a hole on the eastern side of that park either.
Yeah, it
And-
just looked weird to me.
And you're right, that will be owned by the city and we need to make sure the park is the priority, not the subdivision drainage.
To give you a simple answer, there's a number of parks in the city and nearby that have that dual function of a programmed park space that serve as a stormwater detention or retention facility. So that element programming that into a public space is not unique. I mean,
No, I agree. And I've sat on other bodies where we approved configurations that nearly identical to this.
Yeah.
One, I wanted to understand what I was looking
Uh-huh, yeah.
Number two. What-
I have a question for you. With this being a 25-foot right-of-way access for the majority of the homes, do you have a plan, which I don't see here yet, for guest parking, which is pretty typical in a PUD arrangement? And can you speak to, this came up earlier in our work session, I think as well, trash services, those kind of, high-profile large vehicles, and having garbage cans out on a 25-foot right-of-way street?
I think, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, this would require a private waste management service. I mean, that is our anticipation with a private road. That's not something.
Yeah, that's one of our recommended conditions is to address how that will function and take place.
Great. So then where would the trash, where would those be? Where would the dumpsters be?
So our vision would be, we would record some covenants, some CCNRs within the subdivision that would restrict a lot of things. One of them being garbage receptacles and the timing in which they can be out there, where they be placed, screen elements, they have to be placed in the garage or behind a screen feature behind the front facade of the home. For parking, every one of these homes will have a full-length driveway with a 2 to 3 car garage. We did talk with staff about not only the CCNRs, but maybe within the conditions or on the final plat, along with signage, restricting parking on the private lane at minimum to one side of the street or none. That's something that we've discussed. I think we're looking at those details at a final plat. But Ivory has no problem restricting the parking on the private lane. If we didn't have the depths in these homes to provide a standard full-length driveway, I think it would be of concern, but I think there'll be adequate visitor parking.
You mentioned the standard subdivision of using the 4 acres that you've been originally offered. Did you do a layout of that? And do you have an estimate of how many parcels you were able to achieve in a standard subdivision layout on the 4 west acres?
Yeah, we did. And Mike mentioned it earlier. I don't have it with me. I think it's 13 or 14 lots. There's lots facing, there's only so many ways you can chop this up. So there's lots facing out on Dover Hill, and then there's a cul-de-sac that goes in, and there's a handful of lots on that cul-de-sac. So, but I think it's 14. It's less than the 17, which is something we can do. I mean, it's not something that we came into this process anticipating to do that. And so I think this would produce a better outcome. I think it is a win-win, but if this is not something that's supported, the standard subdivision is totally viable.
Can I follow up with that? That's on the 4 acres that you have the option on.
Yes, the western, what Ivory has not closed on the property, and nor is the city, I believe. We have the westerly 4 acres under contract with the property owner.
There are plans to maintain the curb and gutter as it exists on Dover Hill Drive, contiguous as it currently exists, or do you anticipate any material changes?
No, we would leave, I mean, we would have to obviously cut into that existing right of way to install new utility service laterals to those homes. That's different from what the chapel site has today. Other than that, it would stay as is. And along with a big element of that would be ensuring, and we could show this on a final green plan, the height of those foundations relative to that existing curb in Dover Hill. So it's not going to go up or go down dramatically. If you've been to the site, that western side of the parcel is quite flat. And so I think that will be a simpler element as far as building homes and setting them at an elevation that's consistent with the homes to the north and south and across the street.
Can you describe how the interface with the pedestrian pathway would look, and what Ivory's contribution would be to what that looks like, and how what would that look like?
I think it's a really good question. Mike has taken away my tool. I'm going to try to. Is this maybe just point out the pedestrian trail. So it's 10 feet wide. What Ivory would install would be a fencing material up front along both sides of those 4 lots, and then pave. I think, Mike, what did we decide? I mean, it's 10 feet wide, so maybe an 8-foot asphalt trail. And that parcel would be dedicated to the city. We would improve it, dedicated to the city. We'd want to get that fencing in as soon as possible to provide the privacy for the new homeowners. We'd probably wait till the homes were built because the fence would probably get damaged during home construction. So upon completion of those 4 homes, the privacy 6-foot tall fencing would go in. There'd be road base, asphalt, and then depending on the city's desire on the finish, what I recommend is a weed barrier with cobble and maybe some plantings on a drip system on the 2 feet or the 1 foot on each side of that asphalt treatment. But that's open for discussion and design. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Regarding the setback request that has been made, you're requesting to go from the combined 20-foot to a combined 10-foot setback, which gets you more buildable area on each parcel. As I look at the adjacent neighborhood, I just quickly did some measurements, so it's not exact, but it seems like the rest of the parcels are maintaining the standard 20-foot setback combined at least. There is one example actually directly adjacent to this that there's only 15 feet between the 2 houses approximately, but going to 10 feet between the 2 houses seems like it could be an issue blending into the character of the adjacent neighborhood. If the setback request was not part of this consideration and you were to use the code allowed setback of 20 feet combined, is that a deal breaker for you, for Ivory, in this discussion with the city?
It's a good question. I think a big part of our I'll step back for a second. A big part of the discussion with staff and the kind of the guidance they gave to us, because we were given a challenge. Hey, Ivory, this is what we want in a park. Here are the elements. This is the kind of envision programming. Come up with the subdivision that works. And so we scratched what we thought it would be and started over with this. Along with that, we got strong encouragement not to pursue a rezone. So, because the initial thought was, okay, well, we can easily accommodate a park if we can do a different type of housing product, like much smaller lots or like a twin home product that you see just south of there, the R28 zone that is just immediately to the south of the site. We were advised not to pursue that. And so we designed this around trying to deliver a site plan and a vision for streetscapes that fit in as much as possible with the existing neighborhood. And that's why we focus so much on keeping these lots at that 8,000 square foot minimum. In exchange for that, we needed some relief on setbacks. And we designed it in ways you can see there's plenty of depth in the lots, but the widths are challenging. And so to answer your question very clearly, that is something that we would need to make this subdivision work. So the variance on that side setback, the combined 10 versus the combined 20 is a significant element of this design.
Can I ask a commissioner a question or follow up on that? So I think this, some of these points were brought up in the work session. Or some of the concerns via the setback that you have regarding the architectural massing in terms of how the PUD's going to look and feel to the overall community.
Yeah, that was my concern.
So having the site plan is or the site elevation.
Well,
Helpful.
It's helpful, but the buildable area is defined in the plat. And so
Right.
if this plat is approved with these setbacks, then even if the houses were proposed one way by Ivory, but someone bought the property and demolished the house and put up another one, they'd be able to build to this
To the
10-foot setback. There's separation between buildings.
Yeah, I had a note as well as we were going through the presentation. I understood the lot size argument, lot coverage in terms of whether or not that was harmonious.
Commissioner Ebler, I'm going to stop you right there just in the interest of time.
Okay, absolutely.
We'll have our time
I
to
will
deliberate
suspend.
as a commission. Thank you. I appreciate what you're doing, but we haven't had given the public a chance to speak yet either. So thank you.
Appreciate the time. Happy to answer any questions following the public.
Thank
hearing.
you. If you'd remain
Thank you.
available, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. I do have some of these here. If anyone's holding on to one of those, bring it up. You just start it at the end and they'll pass it over. I will start with these. I assume that all of these that were turned in were for this item. If I get you wrong, please let me know. First one I have is Laura Williams.
I just have a question, but I don't know if I can ask it, but it's on page 24 of the proposal. And it's more just about my property. Can we go to page 24? Is that possible?
Commission, would you like me to do
Well, why
that?
don't you ask, this is something maybe you can clarify with
There's a
staff
red
after
line.
the meeting, but go ahead.
There's a red line that's like, and it seems like the red lines that are dotted are to tear down things. And it's a red line on my fence to tear down my back fence that goes over to Wasatch. So it's my sound barrier fence. It's about half of my property.
I can tell you if it's on your property, they wouldn't have the ability to do that, but
I just don't understand what the red dotted line is on page 24.
I saw that.
Staff can address that.
I can't see
I'll
that.
find out the answer and we can
Thanks.
talk after.
Thank you, Laura. And I have Angie Peter. Is that right? Okay, go ahead and state your name when you come up.
My name is Scott Peters. I live at 3589 Avondale Drive. I also grew up on Summer Hill Drive. Interestingly, I also took care of this park from age 13 to 19. So it's dear to me. I'm a landscape architect and I've spent the last 26 years dedicated to community planning, park and recreation design. This is what I do. And I'm also the chair of the city's architectural review committee. The first thing I'd like to say is that I'm very grateful for the city's efforts to preserve this park and open space. It's critical to the health of the community and the quality of our life. Once park and open space is gone, you never get it back. And we, as you know, have limited park space in our community. So we need this park. And I appreciate the city's efforts. So thank you. I also think that the city and the developer have done a good job with the plan. There's no change in zoning. The lot sizes match the lots on Dover Hill, on Summer Hill, as well as on Avondale. I think that's really critical and important. I also appreciate the fact that they've preserved the front and rear setbacks. A big deal to me is that the lots on the park face the park. They don't back up to the park. That's really critical to get those eyes on the park. As well as there's strong frontage, street frontage, as well as visual access from 7650 South and Wasatch Boulevard. Also appreciate the fact that the pavilion and some of the lower parking that's existing has been preserved. And I appreciate that they provided the pedestrian access to provide for neighborhood access from Dover Hill Drive. With that, I do have 4 concerns. Some of them have been mentioned. The first, these are the side yard setbacks. Second is no accommodation for on-street visitor parking. Third is the width of the pedestrian connection and multi-use path. And fourth is the proposed retention pond in the park. Regarding the side yard setbacks, 5 feet on both sides has been mentioned, does not match the character of this neighborhood. I would recommend that they provide 5 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other. It's a compromise from the standard 20 feet. And then they match the 2 10-foot side setbacks so that you get a total of 20 feet on one side. So you do get some corridors that are a little bit wider. Regarding the visitor parking, while I am an advocate of reduced road widths, a 22-foot or even a 25-foot paving section does not provide enough space for two-way traffic and parking, especially with no sidewalks adjacent to the private roads.
I'm going to warn you, you've got less than 30 seconds left. So if you would, and we do want to hear what you have to say.
So I would recommend that they add some parallel stalls on one side of the road with landscape islands to break those up. Regarding the pedestrian connection, a 10-foot corridor with a 5-foot path as described in the application only leaves 2.5 feet on each side. The standard for a typical multi-use path is 10 to 12 feet with a minimum of 2.5 feet on each side as a buffer. So if you're riding a bike or something, you don't hit what is adjacent to the path. I would recommend that they go with a 20-foot wide corridor with an 8 to 10-foot wide path and 5 to 6 feet on each side. Finally, with the retention pond, we have very limited park space that's being preserved. It's critical that we don't create a big hole in the park and that we preserve that open space for active recreation. Again, I want to applaud the city's efforts to preserve this portion of the park, as well as Ivory's willingness to work with the city to create a plan.
Scott, we've
that
got to be
creates
fair to
valuable
everyone in the room, so
park
I'm going to have
space.
to stop you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Donald Wilson. We won't start it until you get there. Take your time.
I'll make this quick. I made some bullet points to be on the record. I totally disagree with this whole thing. Oh, okay. But here are my concerns. Have you already, on this panel, made up your mind? Because if you have, I would expect you to recuse yourself right now and not be involved in this. Whether, either way that you are looking at this, if you made up your mind, get off the panel. 2, lost the view. I live in a 1-story house. I'm on, if you look at the map, I'm right next to lot 106. So I back up to the fence to the church now. Now, if that house 106 and one behind it is more than 1 story, my whole view from my backyard has been destroyed. Also, if it's more than 1 story, the people in those houses have total access to everything in my backyard. And that's not right. That's not why we bought that property many, many years ago. Next, I got, in regard to that, people looking into the yard from the houses, that's an invasion of my privacy. So if the house backing up to my house is not 1 story, then I lose all that stuff. I'm very concerned about the traffic on Summer Hill Drive being it the only access to this park. I like the idea of the park, but no planning has been put into parking. And no planning has been put into snow removal. No planning has been put into fire safety. I'm looking at the plan and I don't see how a fire truck can get down those streets and service those new homes in that area. 5-foot leeway from my fence. I'm on lot 204, which is adjacent. It's not enough. 5 feet. I mean, that's absurd. I talked about fire safety, snow removal. Here's something I would want to put into this deal. And you can do it. You're the council. If this plan goes through, I would expect that Ivory Homes be prepared to buy my house at market value.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Wilson.
can
That's
move
your
out.
time. That's your time right there. We
Okay.
appreciate your
Thank you
voice.
for
Thank
listening
you.
to me. Do the right thing. This is not right for the neighborhood.
Thank you. Mike Peterson. No, actually, we ask that you don't. We know that you have strong opinions, many of you both ways, and we want to be respectful of everyone in the room. And while that makes Mr. Wilson feel good, it may make some other people not feel good. And let's have a civil conversation. Thank you.
And thank you for the comments. I hesitate speaking, but I wanted to at least offer some thanks first to you as the Planning Commission for your service. It's a tough job and filtering through all these comments. Also, I want to thank Mike Johnson for an outstanding job of summarizing the city's process in trying to be sensitive to the residents of Dover Hill. As a mayor going out of office over last year, we are approached by literally hundreds of residents of the Dover Hill area asking us, please do what you can to save that open space. We know our city's all built out. We know we're deficient in open green space. By trade for 45 years, I'm a parks and recreation practitioner, so it's a passion of mine to do whatever we can to save open space when it's available. As Mike mentioned, we immediately went to the church and proposed to obtain all 3 acres. Again, in appreciation of the community who we documented contributed in cash, material, and labor in today's value, $1.3 million. We presented that to the church to show what we felt was an equity interest in that full 3 acres of green space. To make a long story short, they didn't accept our proposal, but they did give credit to that if we would purchase the other 2 acres, and that'll cost the city several $100,000. There's a lot of things still to work out, but there's no question, as somebody mentioned, I think Mr. Peters mentioned, we're not making open space anymore. We need to do what we can to save this. In my personal meetings with the developer, I asked for 4 things. 1, give us some more of the green space. That didn't work. 2, we need access from the north. 3, we need to save that pavilion. It's a $250,000 structure. And then the 4th was we needed more frontage because what the church was offering us was about 80 foot of frontage. They offered us 3 of the 4. We think it's doable. As Mike mentioned, there's a lot of steps we still need to go through, but in the end, working with the community, having all landscape architects, we will have what we would call a quality neighborhood park. And if you look at National Recreation Parks Association standards, that community is totally deficient in green space necessary for those neighborhoods. So we're supportive conceptually of the direction we're going. We've got a lot of things to work out, but we appreciate our planning staff, Ivory Homes for compromising with us, for you hearing all of the concerns, and we trust your direction on that. And but again, as I leave office, I think this is a valuable consideration for the Planning Commission and our City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Pines.
Hello. I'm a resident on we're a resident on the northern hillside overlooking the park. First, I'd like to thank the committee for taking a look at this complicated situation and putting a lot of effort into it. Overall, I have 1 comment and then 1 question. So overall, our concern is about the hillsides and the sensitive land, excessive landfill, and the seismic risks from the 2 fault lines that are actually run through the property underneath the proposed housing, through the hillside, and also right across the street on Wasatch. So we are concerned about excavation and landfill. I mean, the stadium is a 15-foot drop. They have a house on top of the 15-foot drop on the stadium right now. That will be removed to access a retaining wall to the hillside that supports the backyards of me and my multiple neighbors on both sides. Also, talking is Ivory Home just talking. They're talking about excavating right behind the hillside and also raising up 10 feet of landfill on top of probably existing landfill, because the previous developer Merrill has stated in the Salt Lake Tribune that there's a lot of landfill put in there to make the park. So in a seismic area, having 10, 15 foot of landfill, I would consider a serious risk. Yet alone if they have raise it 10 foot and then put a 30 to 35 foot home on there, that's a 45 foot raise behind us, and that will impact the value and sight lines of all the houses on the hillside. So we're concerned about how much they can go into the hill and what they're going to do and how much they can raise up the land as opposed to starting at the base of the flat faces. Some people have noted and just building out. Also, I would ask in our preliminary questions to the Planning Committee, it was suggested that the sensitive lands would be extended to the hillside, which, and if it is extended to the hillside also, does that mean the additional restrictions to R18 are going to be respected, which is also lower height and other considerations? So is the hillside actually sensitive land, and will those changes, those restrictions be respected?
Thank you. Steve McIntosh. I have a message from people who are participating online to ask you to please stay close to your mic so they can hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Steve McIntosh, Madam Chairwoman, members of the commission, Mr. Johnson. I get the fact that you have done an awful lot of work on this project. I don't dispute the fact that this land will be built on. I don't dispute the fact that there's a need for a park. I think we have the beginnings of a great project. There is simply too many unanswered questions to go forward with this project tonight. There is no reason you can't table this for 60 days, get involved with the residents, because Mr. Johnson has said probably 5 times in the work session and here that he's had numerous meetings with the residents. I never found out about this project until I saw a sign tipped over like this on the church property. That's not noticed with the residents. So the residents have not been noticed. Apparently, some of them have had meetings with the city. All of these people are not aware of that. That's a good point. You should take that under advisement. Let's see, snowfall. There is no place for snow storage. I've seen PUDs. I work up in Alta, Snowbird, Brighton, and Solitude. I know snow storage. We get a lot of snow in that neighborhood. If you call Public Works and talk to them, they will tell you there is more snow in that neighborhood. It's because the warm water comes from California across the lake, hits the mouth of Big Cottonwood, and dumps on the Dover Hill Drive neighborhood. If you have no place to put snow storage and you have a private road, you call a contractor in, and what does he do it? As soon as there's nobody looking, he dumps it in the street. Why should the city of Cottonwood Heights have added snowplow costs for this? We shouldn't have to. Chief Russo doesn't have enough people to sit there and police it, so that's not an option. You need to provide snow storage. Let's see. If you give up something in the process in the beginning and you realize it's a mistake later on, you never get a chance to get it back. Ivory Homes said they designed a 14-lot subdivision that conformed to the zoning. We've never seen it. If everybody cares about the residents so much, how come there's never been any other public notice except for one public hearing in between the time we celebrate the first supper of the country and the birth of the Christ child? I don't get that. I understand we're under a time constraint here. I'd be willing to bet the church will give us an extension on performance.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. That's your time.
Road width, Dover Hill has a
Mr.
60-foot
McIntosh, we have to
right-of-way.
respect everyone who's in the room. We appreciate you being here and your comments. Thank you. Those were the last of the cards that I had in front of me. Come on up. Okay, gentlemen. You've got a lot of people that aren't even, you can't see because they're online listening in too.
Hello, my name is Mark Russell. I live on Summerhill Drive, and like Scott and our outgoing mayor, I also have a degree in Parks and Rec, although I'm not as talented as a landscape architect as Scott. I do agree with both the mayor and Scott's comments about once we give up green space, we really can't ever get it back. And I appreciate Ivory Homes even looking at giving some of that park space to us. But I think it does a disservice to our community to get rid of any of that park space. When we moved into the neighborhood almost 10 years ago, from Draper, which we bought a house up on the hang gliding park, and to some of the landfill questions that this gentleman had, or comments that he made, our house started to settle a few years because it was built on sand. landfill that had been brought in. So there's a little bit of an ethical question that I have for any home builder to come in and try to sell homes that are built on fill. And then when you throw in the potential earthquake fault line, I mean, what person in their right mind would want to buy a house that is potentially going to cost them thousands and thousands of dollars a year to have earthquake insurance? I know I wouldn't want to. Aside from that, the green space is so important. We now have kids, and Scott is one of these. He's bought a house in the neighborhood that he grew up in behind his parents, and he actually has kids that have enjoyed the neighborhood that he grew up in. And we're starting to see more people come in with families. So this park space is the most important thing that we can preserve right now. And as the mayor said, we've built out the city. There is no more green space to be had if we put houses on it. And to his comment about losing the privilege that he has to be able to, if he wanted to, walk around naked in his backyard. I'm not saying you do, Don, but if he wanted to, why wouldn't he be able to? You put a 2-story house up there, he's not going to be able to. I have some questions, and I don't know if I can address them here. I know I've got very limited time, but just to, as I was, I may have lost my paper as I was doing the shuffle with, I'll go from memory. How large are these houses? What's the setback with a 5-foot? That's unconscionable in my opinion. And there's my time. I suppose.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here. Public comment's still open. If you haven't put in a card and you want to, please approach state your name, speak into the microphone clearly.
Do you guys want these cards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name's Joe Spataro. I live on Summerhill Circle, which is in that same neighborhood. Is that close enough?
That's
good.
Better.
Okay. Yeah, first off, I want to thank the mayor and everyone at the city for paying so much attention to this issue. I started an online petition not long after the church sat for several months to gauge interest in green space for this property, and the response was notable over the course of a year and a half. The optics of this, as it looks like on the plan, are that we as a community are being asked to make some concessions so that the city might even have the opportunity to buy those 2 acres, which when you look at it that way, it doesn't really feel like you're winning much, despite the fact that the park design that the city has worked on is actually pretty good. When you look at the potential for a wall of structure facing Dover Hill to the west and on Brighton Point to the north, with the setbacks they have arranged, it's approximately 3 lots to 5 lots when you look at what's there versus what could be there. And if the setbacks stand, that could be a lot of structure with a lot more height than what currently exists in that neighborhood. So there's concern, I think, about what's possible, what's coming. And I think that's probably the biggest hangup when you look at what currently exists in that plan. I think the questions about fire safety, snowpack, all those things are notable and important to consider as well. But the potential for what's there doesn't look good to us at the moment, is I think the biggest issue. We certainly want green space. The park layout where it fronts the road certainly makes more sense than fronting Wasatch as Wasatch grows. And I think that in that regard, I think there's a lot of good here, but we're conflicted with what we're seeing in the plan. Thanks.
Thank you.
Matt Brown, Country
Closer.
Hollow Drive. Been in the neighborhood for just about 18 years. Connected with the community, the mayor, Ivory Homes for the submission of the proposal. Yeah, I like some of the other comments. I like the fact that the green space,
Stay close to your mic,
the
Matt,
green
so they can
space is going to be maintained and hopefully used properly. I have 2 young kids that like to go there and sled. There's a lot of things that, there's an attraction to this neighborhood. to have that green space and to have these additional homes, I didn't hear anything about how we're gonna address traffic. There's already people, this 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, and people regularly go 40 miles an hour on these different roads. So what is your plan to accommodate traffic in this neighborhood? Because I didn't hear one. Did they mention one? I didn't hear one. So that's what I would like to hear. And to some of these neighbors, they're going to have their views obstructed. That's just unconscionable. I mean, people moved in this neighborhood for a reason, and just to have a bunch of cookie cutter homes thrown up in our ballpark and the church, I just think is just unconscionable. So that's my piece. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Mark DeBry. I live on Avondale Drive. I mentioned this to Mr. Johnson, that I think that the park needs to have off-street parking. Avondale Drive and the other streets cannot take, they're narrow streets, and I would like to see off-street parking inside the park boundaries. The second item is the existing pavilion there. It does not serve what is going to happen. I'm thinking about the pavilion at Knutson Park that has restrooms in it and other facilities and landscaping around it. And I would like the Planning Commission to maybe suggest and study a new pavilion that somewhere along the way restrooms will be provided. Why not do it the right way to begin with? Those are my comments.
Thank you.
My name is John Goodell, and I live on Brighton Point Drive. The first concern is I have to echo what a gentleman prior to me said, that I check my mail every day, and I am not aware of any other opportunity for public comment before the city officers. Is there going to be more chance for public input, or is this it?
Depends what we do tonight, but this is the first opportunity. You're
So
right.
this is the first, but will there be subsequent opportunities?
Well, it will, the development agreement will go to the city council. If we make a motion on this tonight and we decide to vote, no, there won't.
Okay, and then I'm going to encourage you to reject it with the hopes that you will provide additional time for input of the residents in the area. I must agree, I feel that the transportation issues with road width need to be addressed. The snow removal is a concern, and the side yards at 5 feet, I think, are far too small or narrow. I envision this, and I see the introductory housing in Daybreak, tall, narrow, and a long driveway to the back. So, and I think that's going to have a sore thumb effect on the existing houses in the neighborhood. So those are my comments, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Actually, I do take back one thing. There will be, I don't think they have public comment period at the Architectural Review Commission, but it would be a public meeting, so you could listen to it, correct? Oh, you do? Okay, so there you go. So when it go, that only when it, but the plan would have been approved by then.
Lucas Pittman. I live on 7590, so I'm a little away from the project. So traffic would be a concern. I think speed bumps would be nice on that road. I think, you know, with them saying they're all right with 13 to 14 homes originally, it seems like the Dover Hill is the big issue. And maybe those 4 homes should not be built, or 5. Just a consideration. Plus with slope and everything, that's going to be a big deal and encroach on the park and make design hard, in my opinion. The other concern, I don't know if other people experienced it, but we lost power a lot last summer. So I think infrastructure is also a concern. I'm an advocate of private property and private property rights. So, but knowing that, I won't buy a house in HOA. They shouldn't buy land that has setbacks that say 10 feet if they want to have a setback of 5 feet. So, you know, they're buying the land, they know the ordinances, they should abide by them. That's all I have.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. It looks like we have one online. Well, thank you. And we'll go ahead and take, it looks like John Porter online. As soon as they let you go ahead, John. I think you're muted.
We'll come back to John.
Okay. Steve Haslam. I don't know if.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can now. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to applaud Mayor Peterson for all that he has done to preserve this green space. I know that's been high on his priority and high on my priority because I've lived in this area for 30 years and my house actually will back up against lot 111. So I have not heard anybody say for sure whether these are two-story homes or one-story homes. I'd like that question to be answered. I am concerned about the setbacks. 5 feet doesn't really seem, is not a lot, especially if you consider a two-story home. As you look, the Ivory Homes has said that this development will fit into the neighborhood. Well, if you look across the street on Dover Hill Drive, there's 3.5 homes to the 5 homes. If you look on the north side of the property, there's 8 lots versus the 6.5 that it backs up. If you eliminated one home on both of those streets, you don't have the side issue problems. Now I realize they want to maximize the selling and the residential area, but if you eliminate a home, you don't have to change the code to accommodate the buildings. And it fits into the neighborhood better. So those are my comments. And thank you.
Thank you, Steve. John, we'll give you another try here. Is that on his end? Yeah, it is still showing muted, John. We're going to give Tiffany a chance. Maybe somebody can help you with that mute button, I hope. Oh, there you go, John. Give it a try.
Oh, sorry, I removed him.
Oh, sorry, that was on this side. I apologize. Tiffany, there you go.
Hey, this is Mike Boropsky, and we're just interested in the plan for the flow of construction vehicles through a residential neighborhood. Like you're planning on building 17 houses, that's a lot of concrete and dirt. Are they just planning to drive that down the residential streets? Also, I was wondering if there's going to be limitations put on when concrete trucks and construction vehicles can access our residential neighborhood. Is there any chance we can get construction access off of Wasatch Boulevard?
We can't answer that for you tonight, John, but that would be a question to ask of the city, should this go forward, or when it goes forward, or however it goes forward. Very, very good point. Thank you. All right, John, let's give you a try. I hope we can get you there.
Hold your space bar down, John.
Maybe, John, if it's easier, you could type it into, we asked to unmute. Sure it's on his side? Yeah.
We can ask to unmute. I've clicked that a few times.
Oh, okay. Maybe you could type it in the chat and see if we can get your comment there. If it echoes something that's already been said, then we've heard and appreciate you being here. Sorry that it's difficult to participate. Oh, they say you're there. And there you go. So yeah, that's the only thing I can think to do, John, is to have you type those in. We have received, by the way, quite a few public comments before the meeting that were sent in to the city and sent forward to the planning commission, all of those. And they're all much appreciated. Anyone else here in the room? Okay, thank you so much. We will, oh, we've got one hand up. Go ahead.
I'm Paul Rich. I moved in on Dover Hill in 1975 and I've lived there since. And I'm very concerned about the setback of the 5 homes on Dover Hill, excuse me. We have 80 feet frontage along on the west side. If we go to 60 on the other side, that's really taken away from the view and everything that we grew up with. On snow removal, we've experienced it in the past. My boys were digging snowmen and houses in the snowbanks there in the parking as late as April back in the 80s. And I don't know if that'll ever happen again. But I'm very concerned about 5 homes along Dover Hill Drive. And I would suggest that they do away with the 5th home on the north and spread those other 4 out in that so it won't diminish on the west side of Dover Hill. I'm very concerned about the height on the east side. Are they going to go 2-story or single story, or what type of homes are they going to build? And I would propose that they move that variance walkway from the north side of the parking lot to the south side along that fence line. And I'd like them to consider that also. But I appreciate all of the input that has been put into this, and I thank all of you for your thoughtfulness and consideration on those comments that have been made this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. And I understand we have Mr. Porter in the room.
Commissioner Coots, I got an, oh yeah, there he is.
That was fast.
Just got an email from him too.
Yeah, I guess exactly.
You are on top of it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for letting me call. I came running down here. Anyway, I want to thank the commission, Ivory Homes, the planning, Mike, if he was a big part of this. I think the plan's fantastic. I think you guys have addressed almost every issue. We wouldn't be in this if some arsonist hadn't burned down the church. I live right next door. I live on the north corner. I had a peninsula lawn. I mean, I thought it was perfect house position because the church was on one side, the street was on the other. I see the traffic patterns that come around my house. Half people have talked here come running around my corner, run over my curb. I mean, I'm used to it. People don't follow. I mean, it's not going to be worse because of whatever you guys have got planned. I think that you've taken a great view of it. The park is down there. There's access from Dover Hill. People walk through there. They walk right now. All these people's calling it a park. I'm sorry, it's trespassing on private property. That's not a public park. That belongs to the LDS church. I don't understand. I'm not LDS, but I watch this stuff going on. It's crazy. So you guys have done way more than you should have. If we don't have this current plan of the park being down below and Ivory decides they're going to just do the other, there's no access, there's nothing. It's been totally, I mean, I just can't tell you how much I think that it's important that we do what you guys, these people have come up with that is just an absolutely elegant solution to the problems of what this property is going to be. The one thing I do want to say is the trees. I live next to one of the most filthy, or 3 of the most filthy pine trees going. I've unfortunately, since we bought the house, had to cut down a bunch of trees because they were built 40 or grew, been growing for 40 years. They're too big. The saving a tree just for the sake of saving a tree is not, I mean, people are going to grow new trees in their houses. So I don't think that's such a big deal. And the storm sewer or the storm retention pond. Parks have storm retention ponds all across this world as part of the development. I mean, that's what they do. They drain, they're for storms. So the park can still be used 90% of the time. They're not used after a storm, or they'll eventually drain out, because that's what retention ponds are designed to do. And you can do drainage. I mean, I do have some concerns about drainage and the architecture and things like that. But at the moment, what we're talking about is, do we redo the property in this PUD situation? I can't imagine anybody doing a better job of putting this together. And I live right next to, like I said, I live absolutely right next to the park, and I'm not thrilled about the 5 foot, whatever, but hey, it's a small compromise. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your efforts to be here and comment.
I'm sorry. I'm Mark Russell again, and I just had a question to you. I have a lot of questions. It seems like everybody in the room still has a lot of questions. How do we get answers to them? How do we, I know I've put my questions forward before the end of the period of collecting comments. But even just sitting here tonight in the meeting, I've got some additional questions. So how do we get those answered?
Good question. And everyone gets their time one, to remind you all. But that is important to bring up. What we'll do once we've had everyone have a chance make their comments is we go to deliberation amongst the planning commission. And we have a discussion which will raise questions, and we will ask them of anyone who can answer them. Applicant, Ivory Homes, and then we'll decide from there. What we do tonight, it may not be the end of this discussion, because it's a conditional use and a PUD and a plot approval. That decision does lie with the planning commission. So it could be tonight, it can be whenever we feel like we've exhausted all of those questions as well. So that's the best answer I can give you right now. And with that, do we have any other public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and leave that open for now, and turn to any questions or discussion that the planning commissioners have. If we have questions of you, we will ask, but this is our chance to have this.
Point of information, Chair. Did we cover 1.1, the ex parte conflicts of interest on the agenda? Sorry.
We did not.
Okay.
Do you have something to disclose?
I don't, but
Okay.
call for the orders.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Does anyone have anything to disclose?
I do not.
Thank you.
I just thought it was important based on.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Are you ready for some comment?
Yes, please.
I always have plenty to say. I'm sorry.
There's lots on this one.
Well, there is. I think that at the discussion that's gone on, a lot of people are trying to make a developer, Ivory, out as a villain in this. Ivory went into this, is my understanding, and said, gosh, we could go up here and build some homes. And in fact, can do that with a normal application process. They don't have to get anything from the planning commission. They don't have to do anything but fill out the normal kinds of paperwork. Yeah, there's some things they have to do, but they can build a subdivision there. And the city asked them, can you redesign yours a little bit to make a park better for us, for all of us, for everybody who lives in the city? And I think Ivory came back and said, sure, we can design this a little differently and your park becomes better. I think, as the mayor said, there's a significant pavilion there that we'd love to be able to retain and not have to rebuild. And so Ivory came back and said, here's a proposal. we can give you a little, we'll change our, we had plans in place, we'll change our plan and accommodate a little bit. And what we're asking is a little closer the homes sit together, still decent setbacks on the front. They still have full driveways. I happen to live in an Ivory subdivision that doesn't have full driveways in all of them. And it's very, very frustrating. They need to have a full length driveway. And they're going to have full length driveways, full size backyards. They're going to have the right kind of setbacks. There's going to be some side yards that are smaller. But everything else, they all must be built within the building code. There's been a lot of question. Are they going to be 2-story homes? Are they going to be 1-story homes? They're going to be basement homes. We have building codes that say what you can build here. They're going to have to build whatever the building code says they can build. And it has site plans. Our architectural control people say what it can look like and what it can't look like. They say how tall it can be. That's in our code, how tall it can be. They're not asking to build them any taller. They're not coming and saying, gosh, I'll give you a little help on your park, but I need another 8 feet in height. They're not asking for any of that. I think what they're asking for is, we've gone to some trouble. We don't have to. And in fact, maybe it's just easier for us to say, never mind. I think the mayor's point was well taken. This would be a nice legacy to leave for our city. And that's where I think we are right now.
Thank you. Some significant points were brought up, but I will start with one of the comments that I think it was Mr. McIntosh who made this comment, was we have the beginnings of a great plan here. I'm not seeing it completed, and there are some pretty significant concerns. In appreciation for all of the efforts that are happening, the pressure that we're feeling to get this thing done tonight so the city council can move forward so the development agreement can happen feels a little bit artificial. I can't say that for sure. I am not involved in those discussions, nor will I be, but it's a great start. It's a good partnership, and there are significant concerns. I would like to see us as the commission take the time and fully vet these. I would like to see the public have a chance to see these vetted, to be involved and engaged. This is their home. This is all of our home. Everyone wants a park. Nobody doesn't want a park. Everyone wants that. We'd all love to see that happen. The concessions and the unanswered questions, I think are significant. So, just in making statements, which it seems like how we're starting here, that's mine. And, after that, I do have actually specific questions while we've got this group here. But, if anyone else has a feeling out there, feel free to do that, or we can dive right into some of these issues that have been raised.
I just want to say that I agree with how you summarized what's happened here with Ivory Homes coming back and easily could have just built a subdivision and we'd have zero green space. And is that what any of us, I don't think that's what any of us want. So if we look at the big picture, is the concession that the side yards are smaller? And I think that's something we have to think about. We have to consider that. And is there an opportunity now that Ivory Homes has heard concerns? Is there an opportunity to adjust the plan a little bit? Not major, but I heard some possible suggestions with take out one home and adjust accordingly. Is that an option? And maybe it's not, but I'd like to put out there that is that an opportunity? But I do think we can't lose sight of the green space. And are we willing to give that up?
Just a clarification though, it's not 0, or we're talking about 2 acres as it's laid out, or 2 acres in some other layout. We'll get, the church is going to sell the city. Well,
True.
that's on the table. the deal's not done, but it's 2 acres as it stands right now, or 2 acres in a different format that may not be as good.
But we have a little bit more control in terms of the minute they go to a PUD versus a subdivision, we at least can look at and evaluate design standards, architectural standards, and layout, the look and feel of the site. Whereas if they just go to a subdivision, there's a minor review and approval, right?
Well, beyond the actual underlying zoning. which
Right.
is Much more generous, and that some of the issues that are being raised are those kinds of in a standard subdivision would be more in keeping. And I think that's, yeah, you're right technically, but I think those are the trade-offs that are happening for about another acre, I think, if I'm right, of green space.
But I think that's always the difficult part of like when we're making decisions up here is at times the interpretation of these projects is almost a false narrative of we have this choice or this choice and we don't. We're limited by what the statutes say, what the general plan says, and we have to interpret this all in the best possible way. And I just wanted to say thank you actually for the public comments. Believe it or not, we actually do read all of them. So when I received the public comments, I went back to them, and there was actually some really, really good ones in terms of when people at least made the arguments based upon the statutes. Like that's a much more influential argument versus I just don't like something, because it at least forces us to read the statute, evaluate it back to the plan and say, is it in conformance or not? I mean, but that's the job that we have when we're sitting up here, is to interpret the laws as sits on the books, not what we like, but whether or not the application conforms and whether or not it can proceed forward or not. But you know, in the work session, I think we did discuss some things, and I think the chair brought up some very valid points in regards to the application, at least that I have concerns. And I'm not voting tonight, not because I don't want to, but because there's 7 voting members. So so there's that clarification. When the vote is called, I'm not silent because I don't have an opinion.
I'd like to add, if I can just request, sorry, briefly, commissioners, make sure to be speaking into your mics, and as we turn to one another to respond to comments, if you can keep your face closer in, just helps us be able to get it correctly for the minute.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. I'd like to add, as one of those kids that back in 1981 was crawling into those snowdrifts and probably trespassing at the time, I am a little dismayed. You know, I would love to have seen this whole thing turned into green space, but it's private property, and it's the choice of a private property owner to do what they want with their private property, the same way that each of us can choose to do what we want within reason, within the limits of the law. So I'll preface my feelings with that. I'm grateful for the fact that we can at least get a couple of acres out of this. You know, it would be great if we just had unlimited funds, and, you know, the mayor regularly asks the question, would you double your property taxes? Because there's all sorts of places we can buy property, but would you triple your property taxes to start snatching up little snippets here and there? And there's a line at some point where, you know, most of us feel like the pain is too little. And obviously this is in your backyard. So, and we get really concerned when it's in our backyard. I also have concerns with Ivory, because I have seen in this valley as a company that takes in $500 million in this state. They have a range of projects, and I'm anxious for this to be a marquee project if it does happen, and not one that becomes something that shows up on the 6 o'clock news like some of the other things that we've seen not too far from us. And I'm hopeful that their best efforts would come out in this project. I do think that when we start talking about setbacks, we go with what we're familiar with, and I think it's possible. Daybreak has shown that there are ways that we can be creative about how things are built. And Mr. Peters' point about, you know, could we put the pedestrian pathway over as a buffer in another area that might allow a little bit more privacy for some residents? That might be one solution. I do like wide pedestrian pathways, but if we go with a wider pedestrian pathway, the problem is that then we end up narrowing the lots even further. And yeah, would we love to see fewer lots? That would be great. I mean, it would be nice if it was like 4 or 5 lots, but again, we're talking about private property here. And my concern is that the alternative is that Ivory walks and decides, well, we'll just go with door number 1, which is, we just put whatever subdivision we want there, and you don't have any control, and there's no ingress and egress. And I don't know that we have to, I don't like things being pushed. I feel like the speed concerns me. And I'd love to hear if the city has an argument for why the time is of the essence. If there's an argument that we haven't heard for why this has to happen on this time frame. We've heard an enormous amount of public comments about the need for further discussion, and maybe it doesn't change anything in a germane way in terms of how the Planning Commission is going to find. But I'm curious if there's a reason for the speed that we're going.
Well, I think as the applicant said, they are under contract. Their clock towards close is running, and I don't know when it's up, but I think it's right around January 1st or December 30th. The city has delayed at the city's request, has pushed off and delayed as much as possible, communicating to church representatives that we would like time to work through these concerns, and they've been great to work with so far. But there's going to come a point where they say, okay, we need a decision. So I know Ivory closes soon. I don't know exactly when, and I know that we have gotten extensions from the church on multiple occasions already. I also want to note, we're not trying to rush any of the technical components of this that will fully be required before any sort of final approval is granted. So the approval does not formally happen until the conditions are met. Obviously, there's concerns outside of the technical things, but things like traffic and snow removal and management and fire access and fault studies, those are all very strongly conditioned. So we've provided proper notice, and we're going through the proper procedure. We're not taking any shortcuts by any means, but there is some timing regarding the transaction of land, and I don't know what happens if we don't meet that timing.
I don't think anyone does. Thank you. This brings me back to one question that I didn't get answered and I think you can answer this from Ivory. Will you own this as a PUD, or will they be for individual sale?
Again, Brian Prince with Ivory Development. Your question is the ownership of the single family lots?
The whole thing as a PUD?
So it will be a PUD, but it'll be platted like a traditional subdivision. So it'll be fee title individual lots. This will be an HOA community because it has a private lane, as you can see. So that won't be a city facility, city infrastructure. So the HOA will own and maintain that street, but the the lots will be platted individually and sold and owned individually.
Thank you
by
very
the
much.
homeowners.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Do you mind if I answer a couple questions that came up? Or would you like me to?
Start, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And I want to thank the residents for coming out. I think the neighborhood engagement is great. There's no monopoly on great ideas. So I've done this a lot, and some of the best ideas come from residents. And so I appreciate the feedback. As it relates to where can I start? The types of homes. They'll be both single level and 2-story homes. And Commissioner Bevan is correct. The vast majority of the subdivision will be dictated by the existing R18 ordinance. So building height, types of homes, height of structure, setbacks, it's all defined on that plat or in the ordinance. As far as the snow removal, on the public streets on Avondale and Dover Hill, those are city streets and will be maintained by the city. The private lane will be owned and maintained by the HOA and its community management company. So that snow removal will be maintained by the HOA. I think there are ample spaces in that private lane design for snow storage. I do not think that's going to be a problem. But again, that will have to go through a design process that will be approved by city staff, meaning there, you do have land development code, you have an ordinance that will dictate the design of those elements. And that same goes with the concerns about the existing native grade relative to the design finish grade. We're not going to raise any part of the site by 10 to 15 feet. Your ordinances and your development code wouldn't allow it. I don't blame you for having that concern because this site does have some slope. But I think it is important to understand that beyond this proposal, there's a lot of local regulation as it relates to how subdivisions like this are built. And so this is a beginning point, but they are good questions. See if I missed anything here. And then as it relates to traffic, this subdivision will be subject to all the other city ordinances for traffic and parking, and we'll go through that final plat process. So anyway, appreciate the time. And I do want to clarify, the urgency is not coming from Ivory. We want to make a decision at some point, but just to be super clear, we didn't push to say, hey, we need a decision now or we're out. I think staff and everybody's worked collaboratively over several months. So it feels like, oh, we've done a lot of work. And then tonight it feels, oh, we just heard about it. So why are you rushing it? And that's a typical situation in land development. But if you tabled it tonight, I don't think it would be the end of the world. It's something that we can, if there's a general support for the idea and the proposal, then I think it's worth continuing to discuss.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question before you leave?
Yeah.
Will the determination of the number of levels of the home be determined by the buyer, or would that be something that you are designing into the PUD? So is Ivory deciding which ones are 1 story versus which ones are 2 stories? Or is that up to the landowner when they buy the parcel?
Considering the unique dimension of the subdivision, the streets and the product. And what I mean by that is I've heard words like affordable and cookie cutter. This will be anything but that. Fundamentally, because of the market, the cost of the land, this will be a very high-end subdivision. So Ivory will very likely hand select each floor plan on each lot, program it to ensure architectural diversity, desired streetscape as you look down both the public and private lanes. So that is not, to answer your question, I think it's not the traditional home builder model where you build a model home, buyer comes in, picks a floor plan, and we build it. It'll be programmed up front and built through one consistent phase of construction. It may not happen all at once, but it will be a little more thought will go into because of the unique nature of this infill site.
So based on that, we saw the whole list of the lot widths, and they range from 68 to, in general, most of them were around 68 or 70 feet wide. And so if you take out the 5 feet on each side, you're left with about 48 feet of buildable area, versus if you had 20 foot combined setbacks, then you would have only 38 feet of buildable area. Based on your product portfolio of typical developments like this, if you were to achieve the 5 foot setback on each side, the combined 10 foot like you're requesting, would that lend itself towards more 1-level homes? Or are you able to say, if it's 48 feet wide, you might be a 1-level home, whereas if it's only 38 feet wide, you might be a 2-level home?
That's a good question. The average lot width is about 65. So you take off the 2 5s, it's about 55 feet, the average building envelope width. But there is some variety in there. And I think even some further design will come with the final plat to fine tune those lot widths to provide a little more diversity. But to answer your question, there'll be certainly a mix of both. And that's primarily because the market will really demand. There's a lot of folks in this community that want to stick around. They raise their kids, they want to downsize. They don't need 6 bedrooms, but they want to stay in the neighborhood. And this will, if I was asked who is the target consumer, who's the target homeowner here, it's that family, that couple, that individual that's lived in this community, wants to stick around, but downsize into what is not a small home, but a more manageable space, particularly for the landscaping. There's a lot of people that have a great house, but the yard is just too much to keep up. And so the smaller yard is really a very attractive element of the subdivision. And that's somewhat counterintuitive, but there will be a mix of both. There will be ramblers and 2 stories.
Okay, thank you.
As the other pragmatic member of the commission, I'd like to remind the commissioners where we stand in the grand scheme of things. We can vote yes, or we can vote no. This project's going to move on down the road. It's going to get reviewed by the ARC. It's going to get reviewed by the city council, who hopefully will take into consideration the comments from the neighbors who appeared today, both on both sides of the aisle, and hopefully take into consideration our thoughts up here. But nonetheless, it's going to happen. And I don't think we serve anybody. We don't serve the neighbors. We don't serve the city. We don't serve Ivory. We don't serve the church. If we just kick the can down the road again, we understand what the issues are. The folks who are going to consider this next understand what the issues are, and they're going to make a decision. And so we ought to just let that happen, and let's move this on down the road from right here.
Thank you.
Well, to jump towards opinions, I think that the plan overall is well done and achieves the city's goals. But personally, I'm not comfortable with the setbacks due to views, due to the character of the adjacent neighborhood. So if it was possible to, I also think that the parallel stalls on the private lane or the width of the private road as proposed is also maybe problematic and could be widened. It takes out more parkland. Well, not necessarily. It takes out more anyway.
But we have every reason to
Let's
believe.
let him finish.
But my point is I mean, I would be okay approving the plan with compliant setbacks to the zoning. Personally, that's where I'm at.
But we have every reason to believe that fellow architects on the Architectural Review Committee.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, the plat, if it proved tonight,
Correct.
they can build out to that plat
correct.
independent.
Okay, gentlemen, I think we have Mr. Allen's opinion. I think we have Mr. Wild's opinion. I don't hear a motion. And I have, oh, Jessica has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I have been listening intently here. And I think there's, among the commissioners, I think there's a lot of good points made here. As this is to be a plat approval, I feel like those elements that have been raised about grades and how these grades occur, especially with only a 10-foot setback between homes, this transition as we move downhill to the east, issues about visitor parking, and what this does, what kind of overflow this has onto the city streets that are outside of these private roads. I just don't think they're there yet. And so I come down on that side of we've got more discussions to be had, because I don't think these issues are resolved. And as I think back to the meeting we just had with the Canyon Center, where we're dealing with the fallout from an old development decision, I think it is worth slowing this down and making sure that this is what's right, because I love the idea of the small, nice home, small yard. I love the idea of generations of residents being welcome and welcomed here and having this be a desired place to live. That's really exciting. That being said, you know, the number of properties, and that's what we're talking about today, and where that stormwater goes, and you know, this does matter. And what are the water flows? How often is that full, right? Does it make this a less usable park? That pavilion is quite large. If somebody were to use that for an event, where do all of those visitors park down the road? That's not part of this, but it is a concern, and there will be fallout down the road from this approval, or, you know, the approval of this plat. So as far as my opinion, I don't think we're to that point where we've really sussed all those things out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chapel. And I tend to agree. And I think, you know, in addition to the comments that you brought up as to why it's not complete, there's also the parking within the private right of way, which is 25 feet, hasn't been addressed. And during the presentations we've heard this evening, several went back to relying on CC&Rs, which are private agreements, to meet some of these concerns that can be addressed here through this process. So I don't think we're done yet either. The other thing I'd like to remind you of is that our PUD ordinance, which is what we're being asked to review this against, asks for a final approved site plan subsequent to Planning Commission approval of the PUD and the conditional use. I don't think we have it yet. I think it's a great start, as we said earlier. And the partnership has obviously been fantastic. We as the Planning Commission have more questions. The public has more to digest here. My recommendation is we table it and we get some of these questions answered. We don't rely on moving it forward before it's fully vetted, where we run into the issues such as in Canyon Center, where we're backpedaling and people are angry because now they're living with something that hasn't been fully thought through. We have the time to do this. I say we take the time and do that and make sure everyone feels comfortable. I appreciate that you've shared from Ivory that you don't feel that there's pressure in losing the deal. And obviously we don't feel comfortable feeling pressured for someone else's land deal. So I appreciate you sharing that. It's helpful. So that's my suggestion here.
Chair, are you ready for a motion?
Go ahead.
Can I put one more thing on the record that I think is fairly important? So we talked about this a little bit in the work session, but just to enter it into the record, one of the key and critical elements to support your points is 19.78.100 design criteria, which states that the design criteria shall be used as the principal tool in evaluating the merits of the proposed PUD. The Planning Commission and the city's Architectural Review Committee shall use the following criteria, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think we can abdicate the responsibilities only to the ARC. And I think it's a joint responsibility, and that while they may be reviewing and setting the elements, that we still have some degree of responsibility and oversight to that.
Thank you.
I move that we continue public hearing on project SUB 21-007 to date certain January 5, 2022.
We have a motion. Any discussion?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Can you list specific items you'd like follow up to so we have
We'll
direct?
get to that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Mike. And that would have been, that was a thought that was going through my head too, is we can advance the conversation, but I think we should give very specific information before we do that to Ivory, so that they're aware of what we're asking of them and what we'd like to see forward. I think you've heard a lot of the comments, and I'm sure you're processing this and you've probably already had some of these thoughts yourselves, but to be very specific with them and what we'd like.
Chair Coots.
Yes.
I would say to the discussion of what would help inform this discussion, that site plan would resolve some of these issues with grades. And then to that issue, this discussion about visitor parking, and I would think at least those two, and it seems like I'm missing one here, but
Here's something that might help us encompass some of these. If we go back to our very own ordinance, our PUD ordinance, a lot of these points are covered very specifically in that ordinance, which I think Commissioner Ebler pointed us to the right one, 19.78. And you go through the planned unit development. We use PUD, planned unit development is what that's short for. Almost all of those are in there, except for, thank you, some very specifics, the parking on the street, the guest parking within a 25-foot right of way for the homes. The park is not on our approval tonight. I understand it's there for the land deal and to give us all a sense why this is happening and moving forward the way it's moving. But the parking there is something that would happen in a separate process. Parking in the PUD.
In addition to those, I want to make sure we heard concerns that the public does not feel that they were made sufficiently aware. So I'm not sure what, and I know staff goes to great effort to try to go through proper processes, and whatever Herculean efforts can occur in the next 30 days to try to supplement that. And even if it's just word of mouth within the neighborhood, you know, I think sometimes these things can be communicated between neighbors and friends quickly as well. But
If I understand.
in Robert's rules, I don't know if there was a second to the motion.
There was, yeah, we're still in.
There was, but if I understand your motion, you're just asking for the public comment to be left open. You didn't say that we were going to continue to
I was
discuss
asking to table the item, which means it would continue to the next meeting.
and leave the public comment
We haven't
open. Or are
closed
you going to
public comment,
close
so
the
that would be
public
open.
comment?
It's been left open. That's not as part of his motion, but thank you for bringing it up. I think what the discussion is do we give within, and yes is what I'm hearing too from most of us. We're trying to cover what those are by referring back.
Yes, please.
You know, we've heard the public right of way, the park and parking within, or excuse me, the private right of way. I misstated that. The site elevation was one. Lot coverage, setbacks, snow removal, trash removal. And I refer you to our PUD ordinance, which actually does cover quite a few of these. The other, and it also refers you back to when we say lot coverage, the difference between this and the overlying zone is what we're asking for and why. The other thing our PUD ordinance calls out for is a little more detail on the actual structures. We have the option as a planning commission to look at conditions that would mitigate some of the concerns that happen within this PUD within an existing long established subdivision, like height. But you know, the sensitive lands don't, because of the trade that you're considering, don't lie within yours, but maybe that's something we could consider because height is one of the things to consider in a sensitive land zone. We'd ask you to show us so we can see what we're evaluating. If you have that information together yet, if you don't, why it wouldn't be available yet, that would be good to understand. There is one other that didn't come up to me, and this would play to, we haven't had this discussion yet, the density, which is at 8,000 square feet, and based on the way ADUs have been regulated in the state of Utah, we have no way to say these can't have ADUs, so we need to look at the density of these with an ADU, which means an additional car and a residence within the walls. So it's just something for us that we have to be mindful of when we look at a PUD, and I think this will be true all across the state. Any PUD, the density issue is different than what it was. until October. I think we've encapsulated all of those. Okay, so there they are to add to your motion. Okay, we have a motion with a list of things we're asking.
I would second the motion.
And a second. And let's go ahead and take a vote on that motion. This is to table this item to have these questions and these issues addressed in our meeting January
5th.
5th. We'll start down here, Commissioner Anderson.
I'm still processing. Yes.
Commissioner Allen, no.
Commissioner Chapel, before I forget you.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Commissioner Mills, yes.
Commissioner Wild.
No.
Are you an alternate?
No.
Okay, you're the alternate. Okay. No and no. Okay. Commissioner Bevan
No.
and Commissioner Coots, yes. So where does that leave us?
4-3.
4-3. So that motion does not pass.
No, the motion passes
Motion
4-3.
passes.
Oh, excuse me, the motion passes. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. So the motion passes, we table the item. Have a list of items we'd like you to address. And we will bring this up again at our January 5th Planning Commission. And in the meanwhile, the public comment remains open. So if you have between now and then comments, questions, concerns. Just as always, you can send those through the city, those go to Mike Johnson, and they will be forwarded to us at the planning. And we'll address it at that point. Thank you. Okay, we have one more item on our agenda, commissioners, and that is our minute, our planning commission meeting. Get back to the date on October 20th. If you've had a chance to read those and attend the meeting, review them, we need a motion to approve and or amend with approve with amendment.
Motion to approve the minutes for the October 2021 Planning Commission.
You need a second.
Second.
And motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, those are approved. And the final motion of the night. A motion for adjournment.
I motion to adjourn.
So moved. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Motion and a second.